Lots to cover this week. But first, a few thoughts. This has been a particularly nasty election season, with American turned against American, Catholic against Catholic, and even post-election, some are calling for the cancellation and eradication of those they disagree with politically. Well, the time for politics is over. Taking up the new president's call for unity, we should talk for a moment about the unity of faith. This is not about getting along or coming together under some false construct, but of unifying around the articles of faith that define Catholicism. Now, Joe Biden is now the second Catholic president, a fact that has been advertised repeatedly during the campaign and again this week.
Moses is freeing us from 400 years of backbreaking Egyptian slavery at the hands of an autocratic, cruel Pharaoh. In many ways, dear Joe, you are our Moses.
I would say that for me, the significance of it is that Joe Biden is a practicing Catholic, and that he brings the very best of what it is to be Catholic to his leadership.
We're going to see a lot of faith and religion in his life, because that has been his life.
Joe Biden, a faithful Catholic, a devout Catholic, and he's not afraid to show it.
All of this presents the bishops and all Catholics with a challenge. President Biden is a professed church-going Catholic, one who supports abortion on demand, which the bishops in a new letter to Biden define as a moral evil and their top priority. He has also promised to rescind religious freedom protections and supports what the Pope has called gender ideology, which seeks to, quote, erase sexual differences found in creation. Now, politicians can govern as they see fit, and they can even support gravely evil policies. That's their prerogative. And while they're free to remake parties and platforms, they are not free, nor are their supporters, to remake Catholicism. It is now up to the bishops and the whole church to determine what they are willing to tolerate from professed Catholics. I thought there were prohibitions for publicly engaging and encouraging intrinsically evil acts. If creating scandal and promoting sinful acts are no longer a problem, let's all run down to the jewelry store and grab all we can. If attending Mass and carrying rosary beads are excuses from the commandments, why not? Stealing's a lot less sinful than, say, killing a child or encouraging it. If the Church wants to retain its moral voice, she must reclaim her teaching, declare it, and convince her children of the truth. And as we'll discuss later, the bishops must also be willing to risk offending even powerful politicians in the name of saving souls, perhaps even the elected officials' souls.
The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. And now, a rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism, that we must confront and we will defeat. To overcome these challenges, to restore the soul and secure the future of America, requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. Unity.
That was President Joe Biden at his inauguration this week in a heavily fortified D.C. For analysis and what we've seen in the first days of this new administration, we're joined by the chairman of the American Conservative Union, Matt Schlapp. Matt, thanks for being here. Your thoughts on President Biden's call for unity and unifying the nation? Obviously, unity is crucially important, but will the Biden policies get us there?
Yeah, this is the problem. You know, President Trump ran as a disruptor, and in some ways, he was seen as a divisive figure because he wanted to call out some of the major public policy problems that were emanating from Washington, D.C. Joe Biden has run on a unifier, but his words aren't matching up because he wants to unify us while he cancels those of faith, cancel those from the conservative side. The Democrats are going forward with impeachment and conviction of Donald Trump in the Senate. So I think half the country feels like they are being persecuted for their beliefs. That's simply not unifying.
Is it wise to accuse half of U.S. voters of being racist and political extremists, as is happening here, and really throughout the culture in various ways?
This was this unbelievable approach that Hillary Clinton had when her people called Catholics irredeemable, and they called Trump supporters, she called Trump supporters deplorable. It's very strange in politics to slur the voters you seek to support you, and this is the problem that Joe Biden has, which is if he wants to unify this country, stop coming after us. Tell the Democratic Party, enough with impeachment. It's just a distraction, and it takes time away from the important public policy issues. Don't take nuns to court. Don't attack people for their faith. Don't try to tell people that believe that there are men and women, that there's something hateful about that. That's how he could actually help to unify the country. I just don't see the policies coming that would do that.
Well, President Biden wasted no time getting down to business. On day one, he issued a slew of executive orders, 17 of them, including rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, rejoining the World Health Organization, a mask mandate on federal property, halting deportations and the building of the wall at the border, and ending the travel ban on predominantly Muslim countries deemed terrorist threats. Are these just knee-jerk attempts to roll back Trumpism, or what's considered his agenda?
Yeah, so what I would say is you can't have it both ways. You have so many people across the country saying they didn't like Trump the man, but his policies worked and were very popular. And now what you have in the Biden administration is kind of a death knell at the center of these Trump policies, which brought in record numbers of Hispanics and African Americans to support Donald Trump. A lot of union workers and blue-collar working class people supported Donald Trump. Think about the Keystone Pipeline. We can look at that as energy. But if that was your job, if you're one of the 1,000 families that don't have a paycheck because that project was stopped, by the way, those are hard hat jobs, union jobs, it doesn't sound very unifying to them.
Well, I mean, just on the border wall question, arrests are down 70% in the Yuma sector due to that wall. Border agents actually requested this, and we're talking about mostly Hispanics. Well, I was down there. I've been down there a number of times. Those are Hispanic border agents. Why ignore this science, if you will, the statistics we're seeing coming just in that isolated instance of the security at the border and how this has contributed to saving those the border agents' lives?
Not just the border agents, but the communities, right, Raymond, around them. This is actually cruel to the people who we almost have a magnet trying to attract them to come to the border because we're giving them this hope that they'll become legal American residents. And it creates great humanitarian hardship on those people, on the communities around the border. They're already... The Biden administration is already setting up tent cities. Once you have to set up the tent cities because everybody rushes the border, you have this question about what do you do with children? What do you do with families? Joe Biden is really just replaying the same tape we've seen many, many, many times. Nobody is going to come out ahead with these policies of weakness in a porous border.
Another action that President Biden signed on day one, as we mentioned earlier, was an executive order to prevent discrimination on the basis of gender identity and sexual orientation, erasing differences between the sexes. This will presumably allow biological males to compete with women in athletics and vice versa. Your thoughts on this and how this is going to play?
Well, look, I just think this comes down to some common sense. The Democratic Party loves to put up signs that say, we believe science is science. I think they're finger wagging at us on climate change, people who have my politics, but then you see the idiocy of saying there's something scientific about saying a baby in the womb isn't a baby. And now you have this kind of insanity and unscientific idea that somehow we don't have chromosomes and you can wake up on Tuesday and make decisions on your gender. I don't belittle the people who have these struggles in their personal lives. Actually, I have compassion for them. But we have to mark and understand what we learned in third grade in science, Raymond. And if we're going to chuck all that kind of like truth, what's the next thing that we all will be browbeaten into accepting? We're on a road that's very dangerous once you start chucking out science and truth and the facts as we clearly know them.
Much was made this week about Biden's Catholic faith, Matt. Rabbi Michael Beals in Delaware even went so far as to compare Biden to Moses. White House Secretary Jen Psaki had an interesting exchange with EWTN News' Owen Jensen regarding taxpayer funding of abortion. Listen.
Two big concerns for pro-life Americans. The Hyde Amendment, which of course keeps taxpayer dollars, as you know, from paying for abortions, Medicaid abortions, and the Mexico City policy, which under the previous administration they expanded to keep tax dollars from overseas paying for abortions. So what is President Biden planning on doing on those two items right now?
Well, I think we'll have more to say on the Mexico City policy in the coming days. But I will just take the opportunity to remind all of you that he is a devout Catholic and somebody who attends church regularly. He started his day attending church with his family this morning, but I don't have anything more for you.
Matt, what does going to church have to do with this policy?
Well, this is obviously a very dangerous potential scandal here. I mean, I welcome the idea that Joe Biden, who entered the Senate as a pro-life candidate and supported the elimination of Roe v. Wade for a short time as a senator until he reversed course and he's never kind of looked back. He's chucked out his support of the Hyde Amendment that limits taxpayer funding of abortion. It's rumored that he's going to allow American taxpayer money to flow through international organizations to advocate for abortion. But just think of this. Was Jen Psaki telling Catholics that Joe Biden is actually rethinking these radical positions from the campaign he just waged, or semi-waged? It was a strange campaign. If he's going to do that, of course we would all applaud him for that, for taking the moral and Catholic consistent policies of life. But what I fear is that was just an artful dodge to get through the very first press conference with the only tough question that she had to take, and that Joe Biden, unfortunately, will continue with his hostility towards life. But hey, I guess anything's possible. I'm hoping for this political miracle.
Well, the U.S. Catholic bishops, led by Archbishop Jose Gomez, issued a strong and cautionary message for the inauguration. They said this: "I must point out that our new president has pledged to pursue certain policies that would advance moral evils and threaten human life and dignity most seriously in the areas of abortion, contraception, marriage, and gender. Of deep concern is the liberty of the Church and the freedom of believers to live according to their consciences. For the nation's bishops, the continued injustice of abortion remains the preeminent priority." Matt, given Joe Biden's self-proclaimed Catholicism, is this a battle, or is there a battle brewing between the Church and the president here?
Yeah, I think there's a battle brewing between bishops who want to steadfastly stand up for the fundamental dogmas of the Church and those bishops who might fit more conveniently within the Episcopalian Church. There is a real battle brewing. It's a battle we need to have. I applaud those bishops, even bishops who might have some different politics from people like me, who are willing to stand up for these fundamental doctrines and do it in a compassionate but yet very strong way. It's what our young people need. Our young people who are trying to navigate in this really confusing society, they need to hear it from their bishops. Raymond, if they don't hear it from their bishops, why should we expect that 14-year-old, 15-year-old, or 16-year-old to stand up in their classrooms and espouse these ideas? I mean, this is a real critical moment for our society. I applaud those bishops who are pushing back on the Vatican's timidity here.
Well, not all the bishops were on board with this statement, Matt. Cardinal Blaise Cupich of Chicago, along with an unnamed Vatican official, issued a rare rebuke via Twitter of the conference's statement. Cardinal Cupich wrote, "Today, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops issued an ill-considered statement on the day of President Biden's inauguration. Aside from the fact that there is seemingly no precedent for doing so, the statement, critical of President Biden, came as a surprise to many bishops who received it just hours before it was released. The statement was crafted without the involvement of the administrative committee. The internal institutional failures involved must be addressed, and I look forward to contributing to all efforts to that end." Matt, why is there this division among the hierarchy, and is this productive to have this play out in public, or is this indicative of the partisanship that we're seeing in the Church at large?
When our bishops engage in the sport of politics, and that seems to overtake the urgent cry from our society for some moral clarity on these questions, I mean, why take any day off from advocating for the unborn? The unborn have no voice, and they are killed thousands a day millions in our country. I want church leaders that will defend that life each and every time they have the opportunity to. There should be no day off for advocating for the unborn. I'm very disappointed that the Cardinal in Chicago believes that it's a seasonal question of defending life.
Well, look, immigration, for instance, is a prudential issue, okay? I mean, people can agree, you know, on the particular policies or disagree. But the bishops, I know they would prefer open borders, a free exchange of people. But when you're talking about something like abortion or marriage, these are foundational, clear-cut moral issues. There is no middle way on these issues. As a Vatican cardinal advocated this week, shouldn't they speak out more forcefully, at least on these handful of issues that are very clear-cut, where there is no prudential judgment at play?
Well, I think for people like you and me, Raymond, who have kids that are trying to grow up in this most confusing of societies where almost every message they get, from music to entertainment to even the companies where their parents may work, these public companies that have turned hard left in their social policies, they actually are getting no support. The only place they can get support, it seems like, is from parents who are devout to the church and when they sit in pews. And what's tragic to me is these kids, they're brave, the ones that continue to hang in there and go to church, and they're holding on to their faith. But when these faith leaders are abandoning these kids because it's more politically correct to go on mute, we are not giving that life preserver that kid needs to get to the next stage in this life and to engage in their own, raising them their own families and you know, handing off this most wonderful of gifts that we have, our faith. If church leaders won't do that, who will? Maybe this is a time for choosing. Maybe we'll have new leaders arise as the church has had in the past. God has a plan here, but I am so discouraged when I see church leaders go for the tall grass. This is not the time for that.
I want to, I guess, back up a little bit and talk about now former President Trump for a moment. This is a little bit of his farewell address. Listen.
I fought for you. I fought for your family. I fought for our country. Above all, I fought for America and all it stands for, and that is safe, strong, proud, and free. I go from this majestic place with a loyal and joyful heart, an optimistic spirit, and a supreme confidence that for our country and for our children, the best is yet to come. Thank you and farewell. God bless you. God bless the United States of America.
Matt, before he left the other day, President Trump also vowed to return in some form. What do you imagine his political future might look like? And can Republicans just ignore him and move on, as some on Capitol Hill seem to desire?
So I've talked to the president about this. He's not going to be leaving the stage as previous Republican presidents have. I can't think of a previous Republican president who kind of stayed engaged in the political fight. But President Trump is going to, and I don't know what exact shape that's going to take. But we will continue to hear from him. If Twitter bans him and other social media platforms ban him, he will still speak. And the more they go after him, the more they persecute him, the more half the country admires him. It's almost like an adhesive between the people in the country who liked him and his policies and the man. So I don't see that changing. And for Republicans on Capitol Hill who think somehow this whole MAGA episode was some temporary nightmare they had to just kind of live through, and now they can go back to John McCain and Mitt Romney Republican politics, I have news for them. That's not where Republicans, conservatives, and obviously MAGA supporters want to be. If we're ever to win the presidency again and do things like uphold life and religious freedom, it's going to be not because of the Republican Party, it's going to be because of this broader coalition. And people of faith are the central part of that coalition.
Well, it is curious, when you went into the Oval Office, Trump's Oval Office, there was not only a sculpture of Andrew Jackson on the credenza behind him, but a portrait of Andrew Jackson hanging on the wall. I've always thought of Trump as kind of this Jacksonian figure who was, you know, rough around the edges. Not everybody in Congress loved him, but the people, that particularly the kind of unwashed, if you will, in the minds of Washington, the people who don't have a voice out in the hinterlands, who are often overlooked, he became their champion. And I think that fighting spirit remains in him. We'll see what happens in the days ahead. But today, or rather earlier this week, both Nancy Pelosi and Kevin McCarthy are now calling for a 9/11-style commission to investigate what happened on the Capitol grounds on the 6th of January. Your thoughts on what that is and what it could mean to Trump's impeachment trial?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important because I've spent decades walking around Capitol Hill. I know the crevices and the corners, and it was a weird day in almost every way. I really admire the Capitol Hill police, but why were they so AWOL? Why was a group of unarmed criminals, people who shouldn't have done it, but why were they so easily able to overtake these authorities? I think everybody wants answers. You know, instead of canceling people and silencing them, we should be letting people talk more, and we should inform the American people more about what really happened. And Nancy Pelosi has an obligation to come forward with the lack of leadership that occurred on that day. We shouldn't just castigate those people who broke the law, but we should also hold people accountable who have authority and clearly seem to use that authority in a way that put people at risk.
Yeah, no, the violence was, you can't condone the violence. It was horrible.
No.
It shouldn't have happened. It's not a form of protest. I said that earlier this year. I'll say that now. We just can't have violence. But this trial, this impeachment trial, is still waiting in the wings. Does this help Biden's call for unity? And what's the end game here, do you think?
It's the opposite. I mean, basically, it's not President Trump who's on trial in the Senate. It's all of us. Because when they use language like, oh, the white supremacy, they're not talking about the sin of racism. They're talking about the fact that you could be Anglo-American and have power, have money, have a good job in society. They're saying somehow like that's a bad thing because they are so focused on the politics of identity, of race, of gender, if there is any gender, of sexual orientation, these types of things. That's how this whole movement, this whole Democratic Party, which has embraced socialism, that's how it animates itself. And so this conviction in the Senate, it's telling half the country who supported President Trump, it's telling them that there's something wicked about their politics, and they're making us all somehow be on the defensive because a couple of yahoos broke the law and did a terrible thing and breached the Capitol. We have to stop being on the defense. I'm a proud Republican. I'm a Catholic first. I'm a conservative second. I'm a Republican third, but I'm a proud Republican. The Republican Party was established to fight slavery, to give African Americans, to give former slaves their civil rights. We have been at the forefront of this movement, and we get put on the defense because so many people in the media and so many people on the left are very good at that. I refuse to be put on the defense of these questions. If we have questions of race in society, let's talk about it in a responsible way. But don't start off by calling me a white supremacist just because I'm trying to succeed in society and give my kids a good life.
But clearly this impeachment effort, Matt, is focused on Trump somehow instigating this insurrection on Capitol Hill. Can you impeach a former president on those grounds? And I mean, and is Congress going to go back and impeach George Bush for war crimes and Obama for Benghazi? I mean, I didn't realize you could impeach a guy who's already left office.
Oh, I got this crazy idea. What about impeaching Joe Biden and Barack Obama for using our intelligence assets to go after their political opponents and reporters, for auditing the Tea Party and the nonprofits that have a conservative philosophy? I mean, if we're going to go down this road of impeaching and then maybe even convicting our political opponents, it's never going to end. And look, if Joe Biden wants to be the president who heals us, he has an obligation to use his voice and tell his party to stop. Instead, he's choosing the opposite. He's acting like he has no role to play here. It'll undermine his primary theme that he can heal this country. He's going to put salt in this wound, and he's going to make it worse. And he's going to actually weaken himself from a political perspective. I know he won't take my advice. The smartest thing Joe Biden could do if he wants to be a healer, pardon Donald Trump, tell his party to stop going after political opponents. Stop going after the nuns who want to practice their faith. Don't use the IRS and HHS to go after people of faith. Stop this insanity. Be everyone's president. Yes, he'll be liberal, but don't use your power to go after your political opponents. That would be a step in the right direction.
Matt Schlapp, thank you for being here. We will check in with you in the days ahead.
Thanks, Raymond.